writers, like especially like Alan Moore.
Yeah.
And he was, he had just written V for Vendetta. And who was the editor that was in charge of DC at the time?
Oh,
That
Swamp
wanted
Thing. It was Len Wein.
Len Wein. Yeah. So basically, he read V for Vendetta and thought to himself, "Hey, this guy, Alan Moore, he'll be good for writing Swamp Thing." And so he puts him on Swamp Thing, and Alan Moore pitched him the idea for what he would want to do for Swamp Thing. And I think you mentioned how Len Wein he was the creator of
Yeah, he was the co-creator with Bernie Wrightson.
Okay, he was the co-creator, and so I guess he had say in. I kicked the table.
Getting excited there, Kyle.
I know, I'm getting all excited. So yeah, he had say on who he could add as writers or artists in the story, and I guess he chose Alan Moore, and everybody knows Alan Moore's run on Swamp Thing is like some of the best, that's ever been created.
It's top, and for my list, it's top 5 for best of all time. Again, it's because he saw the potential within young Alan Moore and said this guy could probably take this character to heights I can't even dream of, and he was able to just let him run with it.
Because I mean, Swamp Thing was not a famous and well-known character before Alan Moore. I mean, he was in
its own way it was. But he was more. I mean, Alan Moore still kept the horror element, but he made it supernatural. He focused more on the supernatural aspect of it. Len Wein was more heavier on the horror, suspenseful, I guess viewpoint of the character.
Okay.
But Alan Moore took it to not just he took it to the supernatural part of like that whole landscape of, oh, maybe he's not a man anymore. Maybe he's now more plant than he is human, and that was like. All right, I'm curious to see what that looks like, But here's a tweet from EVS, Ethan Van Sciver. Love him or hate him, this first line here, this one right here, I really don't care what he says about here. This right here is what caught my attention when he posted this. He said, "Look, it's on the creators to make themselves worth." He put worth in capital letters, more money by making great comics. And that adds to what you just said about Alan Moore. Alan Moore, I don't know the exact numbers of what Swamp Thing was moving when it was being published by DC Comics, but it wasn't that high. It was average. It was okay. It did pretty good for itself, but compared to the other books they were selling, it wasn't compared to Batman, Superman, and so on and so forth. I think it was in the 50,000s. Now 50,000 is like, oh my god, that's amazing.
That's a bestseller.
Yeah, but 50,000 back then was not great. It was like pretty good. And so when Alan Moore got on Swamp Thing, it went from 50,000 units that they would sell to comic shops and newsstands and what have you, to over 100,000 within a few issues. And it reached like 300, 400,000 as the months progressed, because again, word of mouth is key to the success of a comic book, or not just a comic book, but any piece of entertainment, any piece of media. That's the reason why Titanic did so well. Titanic, when it opened, was like, I think it was number 8 in opening box office. It was really weak opening.
Really?
That nowadays that's a failure, right?
Yeah.
But I distinctly remember every week whenever I watched the entertainment portion of the newscast that I used to watch, because I don't watch the news anymore, but when I used to watch the nightly news, every week, dude, I know I'm not kidding you, Kyle. It'd be like, okay, open at 8, right? Next week, it was at 7. The week after that, it was at 6. The week after that, it was 5. Dude, I'm not kidding you. And then the week after that, it was 3. And then the week after that, it was 1. And it stayed at 1 for like 16 weeks or something like that. Something crazy like that.
Really?
Yeah. Because of word of mouth. People were like, dude, you need to watch this movie. And of course, word of mouth is always the strongest, chain that like can get any kind of piece of media up up there.
Well,
And